Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the fine-tuned argument. So the argument that that everything is tuned in such a way that everything points to a designer. Hey Galaxy. So on this channel, I like to talk about different topics from both the scientific and Christian perspectives. I feel like we're both on this path to learning truth. I don't think anybody should be in competition with one another, but we should both be searching for truth. So, with that said, today we're going to be talking about the universe. So that's a lot to include. So we'll start in 1966. In 1966, Time magazine put out an article, "Is God Dead?" Basically saying that scientists were saying the more science we discover, we can push out faith, and we don't need God to explain everything. Explaining things through natural forces and such, which honestly is not the case. But in that time, that's what the consensus was. But the truth is, since that time, the evidence for God has been piling up little by little, that God is the only explanation for how we got everything the way we do. So the major argument when it comes to the universe is the fine-tuned universe, which atheists have coined as the best argument for God. So why doesn't this take hold? Why isn't this like a headline? Well, I feel like not enough people talk about it. Now, there are many different arguments for and against the fine-tuned universe. So today, I'm just going to give you some evidence, and we'll just leave it in the air and see where you want to go. We can have a discussion about it on or off the stream, but yeah, this is great stuff. I'm really excited to tell you about it. So get this is so crazy. So if the Earth were the tiniest bit smaller, so not a lot, like 4 to 5% smaller, so like we wouldn't have what's called a magnetosphere, which retains the atmosphere that we have. And therefore, you wouldn't be able to breathe right now. So little things we take for granted, right? Like, if the Earth were just a little bit smaller, we couldn't breathe. Now, if it were like a lot more smaller, like Mars, like if we were the size of Mars, 0 atmosphere. So now here's the weird thing. The existence of the moon, how it creates tides on the Earth. It's a pretty big moon compared to most. And it regulates the wobble of our rotation as well. So there's like a wobble to the Earth, and it regulates that. So without it, there would be no chance for life on Earth, or any kind of climate or atmosphere. So, another thing we take for granted, the moon, just watching in the sky. So if you watch the moon tonight, know it's holding us together. Okay, so you know how the sun is 93 million miles away? That's just a long way. If you just try to wrap your these numbers that we talk about, it's just hard to grasp. But Jupiter is 400 million miles away. It's so far away, it's crazy. But the gravity of Jupiter is so powerful, because Jupiter's pretty big. It's so powerful that it pulls away meteors and asteroids that would otherwise strike Earth. And now it either strikes Jupiter or in that direction. So just like away from us. And you're like, so what does that have to do with anything? Science knows that if Jupiter wasn't there, so the little, if you've ever seen Jupiter up in the sky, the little pinprick that's up as Jupiter, that's 400 million miles away. Science knows that if it wasn't there, there would be 1,000 times as many asteroids and meteors that would fall and hit Earth. Just crazy, thousands. And if that were the case, we wouldn't be here, or we'd be looking up into the sky, wondering when it would hit next. Like, is it gonna hit us? So it's pretty important. So to put this in perspective, let's say so we have a meteor that hit Earth in 1908. That's 150 feet in diameter. So I was trying to look online to see how long is 150 feet and 180 feet in diameter, and that's like 18 stories tall, or 60 yards in a football field, or like 5 school buses. So whichever one you can kind of wrap your mind around, that's the diameter of this meteor. And it hit in Tunska, Siberia. And it came in at 35,000 miles per hour. Just crazy fast. Exploded about 5 miles over the surface of the Earth in Siberia. Now, the power of that explosion was the equivalent of 1,000 Hiroshima bombs, and it instantly flattened 80 million trees. Just crazy. So just think, if you see Jupiter up in the sky, just know it's and Saturn, I think, too. They're both keeping asteroids away from us, and just another thing that we take for granted. Okay, so we talked about the sky. Now let's go back down to basics. Water. Water has 2 interesting properties. So most liquids that are able to be frozen, so most liquids that when they get colder and colder, the matter gets denser. The material gets denser and denser. Water is different in that when it gets colder and colder, it actually becomes less and less dense. Scientists have said that if it wasn't this way, there would be what's called a runaway freezing effect, and life couldn't exist. So I'm assuming what this means, runaway freezing effect, is that icebergs, as it gets frozen, it would fall down to the bottom of the ocean, and then over and over again, because then it would, all this coldness would just keep happening over and over again, turn the water into a slushy. And then that slushy would freeze, and then it would freeze the earth. So because the water would fall down to the bottom, it wouldn't heat up from the sun. It's designed in such a way that it turns into a cycle instead of a problem. So just amazing to think about these different things. The second property of water is called viscosity, a fancy word for the thickness of water. Aren't the glaciers freshwater? I'm not 100% sure about glaciers. Glacier ice is the second largest reservoir of water on Earth, and is the largest reservoir for freshwater on Earth. Yes, they are freshwater. Okay, so this, what's called viscosity, the thickness of water. It's designed in such a way that water can erode rocks and take minerals along with it. Because water is a universal solvent, it can dissolve things perfectly and take the minerals as it's eroding and metals with it, feeding plants wherever it goes. And then animals eat the water and the plants and get the nutrients. If this didn't exist, there would be no life on Earth. So, now the erosion of water, if you just think about it, water over time is a very powerful thing. Like, there is not, if you have like a jet stream of water, you just like, it's so cool. But this erosion of water is so powerful, this thickness of water, that it should have flattened all the mountains on the Earth 10 times over. It's crazy. So if that were the case, then why do we still have mountains? Why do we still have everything? Well, science discovered something that you probably know about: plate tectonics. God has created this in such a way that plate tectonics are creating mountains as fast as water is eroding them. So this universe is fine-tuned. So it's so fine-tuned that if you were to have, say, 200 dials on a wall behind me, and you turn one of those just a hair to the left or right, the whole universe, the whole solar system, life as we know it wouldn't exist. So there's a lot of different variables. I've gone over just a few, but there are, like I said, hundreds of different variables that lead us to believe that the universe is fine-tuned. Now, there are certain odds of this happening. So some scientists lead this to chance. Like, what are the odds that this would happen? To put this into perspective, let's look at examples of chance that we can wrap our mind around. So, Eleazar, how's it going? It's going good. Talking about the probability of a fine-tuned universe. Science likes to think of probabilities of things, so I don't condone this game, but because the odds are usually never in my favor. But in poker, a royal flush is the best hand available in poker. It features 5 consecutive cards, all in the same suit, in order of value from 10 through ace. 10 through to ace. Any 5 cards of successive values in the same suit that's not a royal flush is a straight flush. So it's the best hand you can get. So you deal out cards and you try to guess what other people have, and at the end you reveal your cards. So when you deal out cards to the players at the table as like the dealer, the odds of the person who is dealing the cards to deal a royal flush to themselves is 1 in 10 to the 5th 5.8 power. Or, to try and explain that, is 1 in 650,000 chances. So out of playing 650,000 times, 650 games, 650,000 games, only once will this ever happen. Zacchaeus, I walk into gambling tips. Oh, no, odds. We're talking about odds. I was just talking about what... No, I don't condone poker, but it's something that people can kind of wrap around what odds are. So out of 650,000 times of playing poker, ridiculous. Only one time can the dealer deal a royal flush to themselves. So so if this happens in the next game, the odds of yourself dealing a royal flush again is 10 to the 11th, or 1 in 422 billion. And if it happens in the third game, odds are 10 to the 16, or 275 trillion. So we're dealing with big numbers that we can sort of wrap our mind around. Yeah, I don't condone this at all, but I'm just talking about the odds of this happening. It's just so slim. So with that in mind, let's try to compare what are odds of certain things in the universe of certain things happening. So the precision to calibrate the strength of gravity is 6 royal flushes in a row. So Christian, what I'm talking about is the odds that we live in a universe that this calibration of the universe would happen by chance. Like, it wasn't designed by a creator, but it just happened by chance. What are the odds of it happening? The precision required to calibrate quarks. This is what I was trying to 10 to the 35th power. Spoiler alert. So quarks are like what holds atoms together. So you need a certain amount of quarks. Otherwise, atoms don't hold together. The odds of that is 12 royal flushes. So staying in a poker game and 12 royal flushes happen. So this is kind of a big topic, big concept, but the precision required to calibrate what's called the cosmological constant, which Einstein created and then later removed, and then scientists have tried putting it back in. It's been a variable that cosmologists use that some scientists debate over. But right now it's what they need to make the universe make sense. Exactly, Zacchaeus. I just want you to know the odds of this cosmological constant, the precision required to calibrate it, it's 28 royal flushes in a row, or 10 to the 90th power. I was like, what? How many zeros are 10 to the 90th power? And I just want to paste this number into chat. That's how big of a number we're dealing with, right? For this constant. If you were to dial it just a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, all life would not exist. Okay, so Paul Davies is an English physicist, and he said in his book, how much chance can we buy in scientific explanation? So how much are we willing to go along with in scientific explanation? One measure of what is involved can be given in terms of coin flipping. Okay, Zacchaeus, we're going to coin flipping now. No talking about poker anymore. All right, so the odds of 10 to the 120 to 1, which we didn't even come close to that. We did 10 to the 90th power. So can you imagine that? 10 to the 120th. So more zeros than what I just posted. It's kind of like getting heads no fewer than 400 times in a row. So if you keep flipping, 50-50 chance, right? You keep flipping that, and it lands on heads 400 times in a row. He said if the existence of life in the universe is completely independent of the big fix mechanism, if it's just a coincidence, then those are the odds against our being here. That level of flukiness seems too much to swallow. Romans 1:20 kind of stuff. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. Oh, I'm going to include that in my next part. Thank you, Zacchaeus. So I was like, okay, what does Google say about these life-compatible, the odds of life-compatible numbers? So the physicist Lee Smolin has calculated that the odds of life-compatible numbers coming up by chance is 1 in 10 to the, like maybe 150. Like you just did 120, so maybe 150. No, 229. It's just incredible. So for all this to happen by chance is ridiculous. Statistically impossible. Yeah, exactly. So with all this science, you have to make a decision. Was the universe designed, or is there a reason for this unlikely, impossible odds for life? So scientists have tried to come up with an explanation for the chances. Yeah, yeah, I know. I don't have enough faith to believe this is all by chance. As you probably heard, there's a concept going around called the multiverse. That is, there are an infinite number of universes, and that ours is just the one universe that was fine-tuned. And like Wolfler was saying, I think it takes more faith to believe in that than it does to follow science and see that our universe was designed because it's fine-tuned. So, essentially scientists are saying, well, because of the chance, we are increasing the odds by creating more universes, an infinite number of universes. So it's just incredible. So that's the science part of things. There are a lot of debate on this, and I could go into that, but that's the evidence. That's what I've found, and those are the odds. So yes, it takes more faith to be an atheist than to just believe in Jesus. Oh man. Well, so yeah. I hope you can take some nuggets away from that, and I'll be talking in a little bit about what the Bible says. Just some incredible things inside the Bible. So, as Christians, we lean heavily on the Bible. Not only because we believe in it, but because we know it to be true based on evidence. Now, the Bible is not an answer to everything. It's not a math book. It's not a science book. It doesn't describe how DNA is formed or how to program a computer. But if I see something scientific in the Bible, I expect there to be a scientific fact in my world that it lines up with. If the Bible is to be true, then they should line up. Even if it wasn't the purpose of the Bible, because the Bible is our way of connecting with God and his path for us, which included Jesus, and that's why it's all about Jesus. And including the scripture that we talked about today. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. Yeah, so this is Romans. This is Paul talking. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. So let's go over what God has shown us. So we've sort of gone over this first scripture. I'm going to go to it right now. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But we have people who could not have known what happened at the beginning of the universe. Speaking truth. Science has confirmed that this universe started at a certain time, with certain matter and a certain place. And just like the other Romans chapter, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. And I, when I came to you, brothers, did not come proclaiming to you the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom, for I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling, and my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in of the power of God. Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom, although it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age, yet who are doomed to pass away. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages of our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this. So there's this knowledge, secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages. So before time began, God had created all of this to be. So that's the first time I'm going to go into the New Testament. We're actually going to dive into the Old Testament. So let's go to Job 26. Job is the oldest book of the Bible, and it's so cool that back then, let's just go into it. So this is like, okay, so I was kind of curious what the context of this. He's talking to Bildad, the Shuhite. Dominion and fear are with God. He makes peace in his high heaven. Is there any number to his armies? Upon whom does his light not arise? How then can man be in the right before God? How can he who is born of woman be pure? Behold, even the moon is not bright, and the stars are not pure in his eyes. How much less man, who is a maggot, and the son of man, who is a worm. There's your worm reference for the day. Then Job answered and said, How you have helped him has no power. How you have saved the arm that has no strength. How you have counseled him has no wisdom, and plentiful declared sound knowledge. With whose help have you uttered words, and whose breath has come out from you? He's talking about what God created all of this. The dead tremble under the waters and their inhabitants. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. He stretches out the north over the void and hangs the earth on nothing. Most ancient civilizations did not believe the earth floated in space. And here we have Job saying that the earth hangs on nothing, so it's in space. They had no concept of this because the stability when you walk and the firmness of the earth led them to believe that it was seated on something else that was firm. So you'll see, like in Greek mythology, they would put it on the back of Atlas, or some put it on the back of an elephant, or in a lot of Asian cultures, the back of a turtle. I've even seen a catfish. But here are Israelites who think that the earth is suspended in space. So here's another example of things that they shouldn't have known back then. Could go to Isaiah 45. So this is Isaiah, a prophet. Thus says the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, the one who formed him. Ask me of things to come. Will you command me concerning my children and the work of my hands? I made the earth and created man on it. It was my hands that stretched out the heavens and commanded all their host. So this concept of stretching out the heavens, the space, like usually when heavens are mentioned in the Bible, it's essentially the space and the universe. We know that we're in a universe that's expanding. Science tells us this. Most time, the Old Testament describes this expanding universe. The expression is used that he stretched out the heavens. God stretched out the heavens. And it's true. But I don't know how Isaiah or anyone of his time could know such things. Like, how do you know that the earth, like, if you dive deeper into this, it's so amazing how they weren't supposed to know this, and they have this revelation from God, and it's true. Here we have a prophet. Okay, and so we go to Jeremiah 10. Lean not the way of the nations, nor be dismayed at the signs of the heavens, because the nations are dismayed at them. And I just saw this cool verse. There is none like you, O Lord. You are great, and your name is great in might. Ancient nations were extremely scared by the heavens. Because, you see stars and you're like, wow, what are those? And I think a lot of ancient people thought they were gods up there. And I know in Greek mythology, they saw constellations and thought those were to be gods. Ancient Chinese cultures believed that an eclipse was when a dragon or a beast or an animal ate the moon. Other cultures didn't know how to understand what was happening in the stars because they interpreted these as gods. So here we see in Jeremiah, it says, do not be terrified by the signs of the heavens. So just because there are, God reassuring his people that he's made this a certain way, and there's nothing in it that you should be afraid of, even if others are dismayed by them. Cool. All right, so here is probably the coolest part of this whole thing. So here we go in Job. This is in Job 38. So a lot of this is Job and God going back and forth. I'm actually going to be diving into Job. That's my next book that I'm going into. Where it's just God and Job going back and forth. Job wrestling with God and trying to say, why is this? And God being like, well, I'm God. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dressed for action like a man, I will question you, and you will make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. So here he's challenging Job, like, you weren't there at the beginning of the universe. Here we go. Scrolling down to where we are. God is trying to persuade and provoke Job to realize that God is in control. And here we have a little bit of science inside of this. So we're going to go into each one. So I'm going to read this out. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season, or can you guide the bear with its children? Do you know the ordinance of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on the earth? Okay, let's go over this first line. Can you bind the chains of... How do you say that? Pleiades? Let's just go with Pleiades. So God is saying, do you think you can keep this constellation together? I can't. Science has told us that this constellation is like, so I don't have so here is Pleiades, and it's a group of 7 star clusters. So in the night sky for Job to see, it would be 7 stars. And we've actually uncovered that those 7 stars are actually 250 suns in those clusters. It turns out these clusters are all moving in the same direction, so they'll always look like this. So it's true that it will stay together. But how would Job know that? How would he know that? Because throughout a lifetime, how are you able to just look up at the stars and know that it hasn't, like, how would you verify that it would stay the same in his entire lifetime? And past that. But we're able to prove that with science now, that they all move together in the same direction. So I thought that was really cool. There's a proof that this line is true. Or loose the cords of Orion. Essentially, can you loose the bands of Orion? So usually, when you hear about Orion in the sky, the bands are the belt of Orion. Probably the most well-known constellation. Like, look for Orion's belt in the sky. Shadow. This belt is made of 3 stars. Sure enough, in the course of time, the 2 right-hand stars will approach each other and form what's called a naked eye double. And the other star will drift away eastward, and the band will no longer exist. But again, how would Job know that? He wouldn't, because he would see just the belt like we see tonight. Like, y'all would probably see the Orion's belt outside tonight if you look at the stars. But eventually, science has proved that they will no longer be together. So God had already ordained that to happen. And we're not sure about Mazzaroth. At least not that I could see. Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season? So we're just going to leave that. There's some speculation, I think. So we'll leave that aside. But then when it says In the ESV, it says, "Can you guide the bear with its children?" What it's talking about is Arcturus, the constellation Arcturus. And if y'all know anything about Arcturus, you'll know that it's a huge star. And God is essentially saying, can you guide Arcturus wherever you want? And he's talking to Job, and God says, but I can. Arcturus is one of the greatest suns in the universe. It's about 25.4 times bigger than our sun. So if you just imagine our sun, that's what, 90? Was it 90 million? 93 million miles away. Arcturus is one of the, so it's 25 times bigger than that. It's a runaway star whose speed of flight is 253 miles per hour. No, wait, per second. It's a super fast star. And I think ours travels at 12.5 miles per second. These numbers are, I'm not sure, but at least I know this star is a lot faster than our star. It's so massive that it actually, that it's actually not affected by any other gravitational objects. So it just goes where it wants to go. So I think that's so cool that God has another thing. Like, how can Job know that? How can Job be aware of what's going to happen? Do you know the ordinance of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on the earth? So here we have Job pointing out God's amazingness. When you think about it, there are just some things that we cannot fathom. Like science can prove things, but it just doesn't have a better explanation than a designer. And it's just such a cool topic to talk about. And I hope this kind of opens the door for some knowledge gained. And if you have any other questions or would like to talk about it, my DMs are always open. You want to post down in the YouTube comments and we talk about it some more, or we'll just talk about it in some form or the other. Thank you so much for listening, and I just want you to know that there is an enormous God that we serve, that has ordained everything to, he set everything in motion, and he's just a big God that we can rely on.